Okay, so I wanted to start a little video series here where I review different books that I'm reading. And to start with, I wanted to discuss a book I just finished called Addiction by Design. And it is authored by Natasha Dow Schull, I think is how you say her last name, Schull. I'll have links down below. And this book was recommended to me by my clinical psychology teacher at chiropractic school. And we were talking after class one day about how technology is just so involved in our lives these days and how it has this natural tendency to really suck you in and pull you into it. But we're also in class talking about addiction to other substances, addiction to habits, addiction in general. And she recommended this book. So, first off, incredibly powerful book. I highly recommend getting it. It opens up talking about how it's basically the synopsis of this book is that I believe it was a thesis paper written by Natasha back in around 2000s, and I think 2012, I want to say, is when it was published. And what this book goes into is the time in history in the early 90s where essentially gambling was shifting. So gambling, usually you think about, you have blackjack and roulette and craps, and you have kind of those high energetic social games. And then you have the old school slot machine where you pull the big lever down and the dials spin, and then you try to get for like 3 sevens and get 3 of a kind. And what was happening is technology was developing, obviously, right? We didn't have social media yet, but the internet was starting to build. There was like AOL instant messengers. Technology was starting to come out in the 90s. And then it started to shift. So instead of these big old school mechanical gambling machines where you like pull the lever down, we started developing digital technologies. We started creating algorithms. We started creating gambling. We started turning gambling into this like a computer or like screen in general, where instead of pulling the lever, you're now doing touch screen interface. There's a program running behind the scenes this book gets into this stuff, how these programs are actually tracking how you play, how fast you play, how long you've been playing. It might give you rewards based on if you're doing poorly. But then the book also gets into not just the technology, but also the patterns of addiction and the issues that people that are addicted to gambling have. So as I've tabbed a handful of things, I just kind of want to go through it. And I like reading books and always underlining or highlighting, making little notes in the margins. I think that's really powerful and one reason why I love to read. But we'll start here. So one of the things the book opens up with is something to exemplify truly how sucked into technology we get, specifically in regards to machine gambling. And it talks about how someone would be at a machine and have a heart attack. And so the paramedics get called. They would rush over to the casino, and they would have to navigate through this labyrinth to finally get to the person at the machine. And if you have a heart attack, every second matters, because especially your nervous system and your nerves and the tissue of your nervous system needs oxygen. And if it gets starved of oxygen for minutes, it can start to die. And so every minute counts if you want to save that person's brain and their life. And so first off, I'll get into why casinos are like labyrinths. I'll talk about that as I go through this review. But also, the book is opening up with this idea that the paramedics finally get to the person, right, that had the heart attack. And as they're trying to resuscitate this person, there are people literally right next to the machine that the person had the heart attack on, and they are continuing to gamble unfazed. So the monitors, like the security cams, would show this. Like someone will have a heart attack while they're at a machine gambling, and the people sitting next to them won't even flinch. They'll just stay in there. Maybe they looked over or something, I don't know. But they wouldn't move. They'd keep gambling. They were so addicted and so involved in the screen that they wouldn't even stop. And luckily, they get into the book how eventually they started training the security guards and they started training the staff at the casinos to operate the electronic AEDs so that they could administer like electrical shocks when needed to these people if they'd have heart attacks. Because the paramedics would get there and they'd waste all this time navigating through the maze of the casino. So this passage here gets into the idea that people, when it comes to machine gambling and the addiction with it, it's not like gambling in a social setting, like playing poker or blackjack or craps or roulette. It's not this like big social kind of extroverted, energetic situation. It's more of this like elusive, escaping the world, finding my own little comfortable zone and not interacting with other humans, just being totally into this machine, almost like a video game addict. It's just you're totally involved in what you're doing with this machine. You want nothing to do with the real world. You want to escape the real world and join in with this device. The solitary, absorptive activity can suspend time, space, monetary values, social roles, and sometimes even one's very sense of existence. You can erase it all at the machines. You can even erase yourself, an electronics technician named Randall told me. Contradicting the popular understanding of gambling as an expression of the desire to get something for nothing, he claimed, to be after nothingness itself. As Molly put it earlier, the point is to stay in the zone where nothing else matters. So this is what a lot of these gambling addicts would talk about, is they would sit there and go, why am I getting so sucked into this machine? And why am I unable to escape this pull, this addictive pull into this zone? And later in the book, they get into how the zone is kind of like a flow state. So authors like Stephen Kotler in The Rise of Superman talk about flow states and why high adrenaline like sports junkies get into skydiving or snowboarding or cliff jumping or racing cars or something, and how your brain actually, you get into this zone, this flow state where all these really good chemicals that are released in your body, your frontal lobe starts to chill out a little bit, so time starts to suspend itself a little bit. You lose your sense of time. You feel really good. You get all these endorphins. But they get into how this zone is like a flow state, but it doesn't give you this huge euphoric release like if you're doing a really intense physical activity that requires your full attention. Instead, this flow state or zone that they talk about is very like mind-numbing and bland, and just like you're a rat hitting like a cocaine dispenser pallet over and over again, and just continuing to get these little drips of dopamine. And you're not really excited, you're not really feeling happy, you're not really feeling connected to the world around you. Instead, it's the exact opposite. You're feeling dull, bored, and like you're just stuck doing something just to do it. And they coined the term rat people in this book, how addicts would talk about they feel like they're a rat on a wheel and they don't have a choice. They're just stuck on this wheel and they just keep gambling and they don't even know why they're doing it anymore. So one reason that these machines can be very addicting is that in this little passage, unlike waiting for horses to run, a dealer to shuffle or deal, or a roulette wheel to stop spinning, it is possible to complete a machine game every 3 to 4 seconds. It is electronic morphine, the crack cocaine of gambling. And the reason that the speeding up of gambling is such an issue is that what it's doing is it's energizing and de-energizing the brain in rapid cycles, which makes you create a stronger addictive relationship with that substance or device. Machine gambling is that of numbness or escape. They don't talk about competition or excitement. They talk about climbing into the screen and getting lost, much like we discussed earlier. It is not the chance of winning that becomes addictive. Rather, what addicts them is the world-dissolving state of subjective suspension and effective calm they derive from machine play. So one thing in this book is the names are changed. So this woman's name's not actually Molly, but this woman named Molly in the book, real life person, talks about how she would find herself lost because she would go gamble, then she would try to go to the pharmacy and pick up medication or something like that, and there'd be gambling devices, machine gambling devices there, so she'd gamble there. She'd go to the grocery store, there'd be gambling machines there. She'd go to the rehab center for gambling addiction, and then she would find herself on the street. This is all like in Vegas, and she'd find herself back out on the street again near all the casinos. And so she drew a map, and so here's all the different places that she's walking around, how it creates like a circle, and then right in the middle there's her and a machine that she's on. Inside this circuit, or perhaps outside, it was not clear, her figure floated, anchored only to a gambling machine. "Where is that?" I asked when she had completed the sketch, pointing at the human machine pair in the middle of the page. "That's nowhere," she responded. "That's the zone." They get into design in this book, how they design these machines, right? So, amazing quote here that really puts into light what it's like designing these machines. When we put 50 slot machines in, I always consider them as 50 more mouse traps. You have to do something to catch a mouse. It's our duty to extract as much money as we can from our customers. That was Bob Stupak, the CEO of the Las Vegas Stratosphere in 1995. One thing the book goes into, and I kind of alluded to earlier with the idea that these paramedics would arrive and people were dying or they were developing serious issues after a heart attack because it took the paramedics so long to finally get to the person who had collapsed. And one of the reasons is that when casinos are designed, they're specifically designed to try and hook you, especially on the machines. So the machine gambling areas of casinos tend to always be right at the beginning of the entrance. So right when you walk in, the main entrance, like of a Las Vegas casino, all the machine gambling is right out in front of you and available. And so they go into like different designs of casinos in the book, and how, first off, not only is that right in front of you when you walk in, but all of the paths in the casino kind of act as little like labyrinth mazes, and their design is to eventually lead you back towards those machines. And so you always want to get people towards the machines. It's the cash cow of the casino, and it's where you can really exploit addictive tendencies in people. But also, there's so many things that they do in these casinos when they're designing them that you don't even realize. So one example is changing the lighting so that you don't know what time of day it is outside. Also removing all clocks so you don't know what time it is too. Putting the machines in weird rows and kind of making little corners and pockets so that you can find little like cozy safe spaces embedded in all the machines, so you don't feel like it's easy to get out or in, and you feel safer, like a sense of security. They bring the ceiling like fixtures and things down really low so you feel like you're enclosed. The machines even change not only for you, so when you're playing, depending on how fast you're playing, the algorithm will change for you, but also depending on what time of day it is and what different ethnicities of people or demographics, ages of people tend to be gambling during those times, they change the music in the casino, they change the lighting a little bit, they change the type of games that are offered on the screens to specifically cater to those populations. So there's way more going on underneath the surface than you can ever imagine, really, when it comes to developing these machines and the casinos themselves. Western societies had been modified and to some degree overtaken by a logic of control that worked not by confinement or restriction of movement, but by the regulation of continuous mobile flows of capital, information, bodies, and effects. Unlike the punitive subjugation of discipline, control does not require a subject as such. nor does it seek to produce or manage one. As we have seen, casino design follows what one leading firm calls the immersion paradigm, holding players in a desubjectified state of uninterrupted motion so as to galvanize, channel, and profit from what the academic consultants quoted earlier called experimental effect. If, as philosophers and anthropologists of effect contend, contemporary capitalism is distinguished by strategic attempts to mobilize and derive value from consumers' affective capacities, then commercial casino design would appear to be a case in point. What I want to end on is kind of the reason I really wanted to read this book. And the main reason was not only to understand addiction better, especially related to machines, but to relate it to the world we're in today. Because we have these computers, and we have our phones, and we have video games, and we have media, and we're constantly inundated with technology. So when I was reading the book, I would just constantly think about, okay, replace machine gambling with Facebook, Instagram, Netflix, checking your email, dating apps, YouTube, Twitch. And one thing in the book that really stood out that I want to end on is a 1991 essay by theorist of technology Donna Haraway is titled A Cyborg Manifesto. And it's argued in this essay that humans have become so entwined with technology that they ought not to be considered as solely organic in nature, but as cybernetic organisms or cyborgs, beings whose natural side is always coupled with a technological one that feeds back upon and alters it, which is arguably true in the world today, and incredibly sad also, that humans are so involved with technology. Like, I'm saying this as I'm speaking into a camera with no one else in my room. Got my computer here. I got my phone in my pocket that I've checked multiple times already today. Arguably, it's sad that I am almost in a way less of a just purely organic organism and more so one that is directly connected with technology and a cyborg or cybernetic organism. And if you don't believe me or you don't share that view to that degree, I'd consider thinking about how samurai viewed the samurai sword. To a samurai, the samurai sword or katana was considered an extension of yourself at the highest level of understanding. Instead of seeing it as an independent tool or object, you have to see it as an extension of your body. It's part of you. When you internalize that, you can truly manipulate this object just as you manipulate your arms and other appendages. And if we live in a world where technology is this constant extension of our own nervous system, is it that far-fetched to consider ourselves as more like cyborgs than as just organic creatures? And I would say I agree. I think we are more like cyborgs in the world today. Think of the last time you went without interacting with technology. It's probably, an hour or two max. How many times have you looked at your phone today? Did you use Wi-Fi at all? Did you use cellular data at all? Did you check the time on your phone? Did you go on social media at any point today? We are constantly inundated with technology. And after reading this book, it is so obvious that we have no idea how far down these rabbit holes go into how these technologies are designed to addict us. Whether it was designed that way on purpose or just naturally kind of evolved into that with capitalism and business development and trying to make better algorithms or trying to connect more people together through, say, social media. Whether it was on purpose or not doesn't matter. The fact is that it is designed to be used and utilized frequently and create addictive tendencies. So I recommend getting this book, Addiction by Design, by Natasha Dow-Skoll, and just keeping an open mind as you read it and trying to see why people develop really addictive habits and how a world around addicting people was created, from old school slot machines and typical casino gambling to a world where technology is so advanced that it can be designed specifically to make more money and keep you playing. Anyway, not to end on a sad note, but just a great book to remind you of how important it is to not be controlled by the world of technology. Get out there, take a walk, take your headphones out, go speak with someone in person, make eye contact with them, get some sun, and breathe.